heard the phrases a million times, right? Unbreakable bond, ironclad commitment, eternal friendship. When American leaders talk about Israel, the language they use is, well, it's incredibly powerful. So let's get into it. Let's unpack one of the most significant and frankly complex alliances in modern history. You have President Biden calling it rock solid. And he's not alone. It doesn't really matter who's in the White House. The message has been amazingly consistent. And these aren't just empty diplomatic phrases. They're meant to be forceful, absolute declarations of allegiance. Think about President Obama. He used the word unbreakable. That's just a bond that just can't be severed, no matter what political winds are blowing. It really lifts the relationship beyond a typical partnership into something, well, something much more fundamental. And then you have President Trump, who took it even a step further. He didn't just support Israel. He claimed a personal, ideological identity with its founding movement, Zionism. I mean, that's a level of personal connection you almost never hear from a world leader talking about another country's politics. So, all of this begs a really big question. How did we even get here? How did this alliance become so special, so unbreakable? Well, to understand today, we've got to go back to the beginning. And you might be surprised to hear it was a lot more uncertain than you'd think. Yeah, that's right. It wasn't always rock solid. Despite all the strong rhetoric we hear today, the U.S.-Israel relationship didn't start with this ironclad certainty. Actually, it was born out of some really intense debate and division right at the very top of the American government. The road to 1948 was long and complicated. And while on the surface, the U.S. seemed supportive, backing the UN partition plan, behind the scenes, Washington was completely split. And that division really came to a head in May of 1948, just minutes after Israel declared its independence. And this right here perfectly captures the conflict inside the Truman administration. On one hand, you had President Truman himself. He felt this deep, personal, moral pull to recognize Israel, a pull that came from his religious beliefs and his horror of the Holocaust. But on the other hand, his own State Department, his defense advisors, they were screaming no. They saw it as a huge strategic gamble that could threaten oil supplies and push the whole Arab world right into the arms of the Soviet Union. In the end, Truman went with his gut. So Truman's recognition was a huge first step, but it was really the Cold War that forged this thing into a true alliance. That global rivalry between the US and the Soviet Union completely changed the game, transforming the relationship from cautious sympathy into a core strategic necessity. And it was President Kennedy who started to make it official. He was the first one to actually call it a special relationship. And, this is key, he was the first to approve the direct sale of major weapons to Israel. That was a massive shift from the arms embargo that had been in place before. To get why this happened, you have to picture the Cold War as this giant global chessboard. The US was trying to contain the Soviets everywhere, and in the Middle East, major players like Egypt and Syria were leaning toward the USSR. So the US desperately needed a friend in the region, someone reliable, pro-Western, and militarily strong. Israel started to look like the perfect fit. And then came the moment that changed everything. Israel's absolutely stunning victory in the 1967 Six-Day War was the ultimate proof for Washington. It showed that Israel wasn't a strategic liability, it was a powerful asset that could hold its own in a really tough neighborhood. Seriously, after 1967, the entire dynamic shifted. After 67, it was like the floodgates of support just burst open. What had been a cautious partnership turned into this deep, multi-layered alliance, cemented by massive, consistent American aid in pretty much every area you can think of. And when I say massive, I mean it. The numbers are just staggering. Just let that sink in for a second. Since World War II, the United States has given more total foreign aid to Israel than to any other country on the entire planet. That kind of money tells you everything you need to know about where Israel stands as a U.S. priority. And this support isn't just year to year, it's locked in. There's a 10-year agreement that gives Israel almost $4 billion annually. And it's all designed to maintain what's called Israel's Qualitative Military Edge, basically to make sure its technology stays ahead of any potential rivals in the region. But look, it's so much more than just the money. The U.S. also provides this crucial diplomatic shield at the United Nations, using its veto power over and over again. It's granted Israel elite status as a major non-NATO ally. There's incredibly deep intelligence sharing. And of course, the U.S. has always been the main broker in any peace talks. It's truly the whole shebang. Now, for decades, all of this enjoyed widespread bipartisan support in America. It was just a given. But if you look closely at the data today, it seems like that unbreakable bond, well, it might be showing a few cracks, especially when you look at American public opinion. This chart tells a really important story about where things are now and where they might be headed. Public opinion is polarizing fast. While support for Israel among Republicans is as strong as ever, you see this dramatic shift happening among Democrats, and even more so among young Americans, whose sympathies are moving more towards the Palestinians. It's a huge generational and political divide. A huge pillar of that solid Republican support comes from evangelical Christians. For millions of American voters, this isn't just a foreign policy calculation. It's a deeply held religious belief, rooted in their interpretation of the Bible. That creates an incredibly passionate and durable base of support. So what's causing the shift we're seeing? Well, it's not any one thing, it's a mix of factors. Social media has made the Palestinian experience more visible than ever before. Younger generations just see the conflict through a different lens. And at the same time, Israel's own politics have shifted, making it harder for some American liberals to identify with its government. This quote from a top American official really just nails it. What he's saying is that the future of this alliance might depend less on outside threats and more on what happens inside both the United States and Israel. It's about the political and cultural directions both countries are headed. Which leaves us with the ultimate question. Here you have a relationship that was forged in the Cold War, sustained for decades by shared interests and deep cultural ties, and now it's facing all these new pressures from a changing world and shifting public opinion. So will the unbreakable bond finally start to bend? The answer to that is going to shape the future of the Middle East and America's place in it.